Economic theory has long assumed that digital platforms naturally converge toward a single, optimal structure. The logic relies on network effects. As more users join, the platform becomes more valuable, driving a cycle of growth that pushes all platforms to maximize scale and efficiency in the exact same way. Under this canonical model, platform sponsors are treated as interchangeable. They face identical economic incentives, so academic consensus expects them to build identical mechanisms to attract developers and lock in users. The empirical record contradicts this assumption. When we examine the market, we see platforms facing identical technological shifts and competitive pressures, yet responding with completely incompatible strategies. This divergence illustrates the concept of non-equifinality. Instead of arriving at a uniform structural equilibrium, platforms take divergent evolutionary paths, even when operating under the exact same market conditions. Every digital platform ecosystem faces a core tension. They must enable third-party innovation to create value, while simultaneously controlling the ecosystem to capture that value. How they resolve this tension dictates their survival. To understand why platforms succeed or fail, we must abandon searching for a universal architectural blueprint. The answers lie in the specific organizational identity of the platform sponsor. In 2007 and 2008, Apple and Google entered the nascent mobile ecosystem market. Both faced identical technological opportunities and competitive forces. Apple's initial strategy relied on strict architectural control. At launch, they banned native third-party applications entirely, requiring developers to build web apps that ran inside the Safari browser. A year later, Google launched Android using an open-source coalition. They offered the operating system for free to handset manufacturers to achieve maximum market diffusion. Over the next decade, both companies utilized identical core mechanics, like their app stores, their software development kits, and 70-30 revenue splits. Yet they built layered modular architectures that were structurally incompatible. These contrasting designs are intentional architectural manifestations of the company's distinct corporate identities. To understand why Apple and Google built such incompatible ecosystems, we must trace their engineering decisions back to what their leadership teams believe their core competitive distinctiveness to be. Apple operates under a specific identity domain, absolute control over the end-to-end user experience. Apple's identity requires vertical coupling. They centralize power, coupling network, service, and content layers directly to the hardware. In 2008, Apple added a gated review filter, co-opting innovation under strict curation. This leverages asymmetric access, blocking third-party apps from core components that native services use. As iPhone sales growth slowed, Apple leveraged this captive user base, prioritizing recurring subscription revenues to maximize its services business and deepen ecosystem lock-in. In 2021, Apple introduced App Tracking Transparency, a policy requiring apps to explicitly ask for permission to track user data. Framed as user protection, the policy was a strategic maneuver. It hobbled ad-reliant rivals by restricting their data access, pushing the entire ecosystem toward Apple's preferred paid subscription model. Every architectural and governance choice Apple makes serves a single objective: capturing value directly from the user by securing the boundaries of the vertical experience. Google operates under a contrasting identity domain: data-driven service ubiquity across all possible devices. Looking at this architectural stack, we see how Google's identity requires tight horizontal coupling. The service and content layers expand horizontally across a wide variety of devices, leaving the device layer loosely coupled. Android's open-source launch functioned as a mechanism to rapidly seed the market. By offering a free operating system, Google secured default placement for its true core product, Google Search. As the open ecosystem fragmented, Google re-centralized control by moving essential APIs into a proprietary horizontal layer called Google Play Services. Manufacturers needing this layer signed agreements, binding a bundled package of native apps to every device. Google permits practices like sideloading, installing apps outside the official store, because it grants them near-perfect market intelligence by tracking cross-platform data from complementers. Under Sundar Pichai, Google has prioritized the deep integration of generative AI across its ecosystem. Embedding models like Gemini is a direct continuation of their core identity. It is a method to maintain their advantage in processing and monetizing data ubiquity. Google's architecture is explicitly built to capture value indirectly. They monetize the massive data flows across a vast, horizontally integrated ecosystem, rather than selling hardware. These divergent trajectories are mapped in the identity domain model of platform evolution. This flowchart details identity domain acting as a central filter between external market pressures and the platform's resulting adaptations. A platform sponsor's identity acts as a cognitive filter. It dictates exactly how leadership perceives and reacts to exogenous shocks, whether those are technological breakthroughs or new regulations. Platform sponsors face a constraint. They must adapt to market pressures without violating their core identity in order to maintain their competitive distinctiveness. When platforms stray outside their domain, such as Apple pushing into advertising or Google attempting to control hardware, it creates ambiguity and alienates developers. Long-term platform survival requires architectural coherence. The structural design of the platform must align with its sponsor's foundational identity. When leadership makes strategic choices outside their established identity domain, it creates dissonance among developers and users. BlackBerry built an identity on enterprise-grade security and professional communication. When the market shifted to consumer-centric third-party applications, they failed to adapt their architecture because doing so contradicted their secure, closed identity. Microsoft's Windows Phone failed due to an ambiguous identity. They demanded strict vertical control from hardware manufacturers, but lacked Apple's loyal user base, alienating developers who saw no rational reason to adopt the platform. Technological superiority and massive capital reserves cannot save a digital platform if its architectural adaptations contradict its core identity. This dynamic directly impacts the modern regulatory landscape, specifically ex-ante mandates like the European Union's Digital Markets Act. The DMA attempts to regulate wildly different platforms using generic size thresholds, labeling any sufficiently large technology company as a gatekeeper. Because platform architectures express distinct identities, generic rules have asymmetric impacts. Here, an identical regulatory block drops onto both a vertical and horizontal stack. Forcing alternative app stores onto iOS shatters Apple's vertically integrated quality control. Conversely, Google's horizontal model is elastic. They route around unbundling rules via paid licensing fees, keeping data flows intact. Regulators must analyze the specific identity domain of a platform, rather than relying on blunt size metrics to avoid unintended and uneven market distortions. You cannot understand, regulate, or successfully build a digital platform ecosystem without first understanding its unique identity domain.